Nelson Mandela. A report came out today about an interview that a ex-CIA agent named Donald Rickard made for a Nelson documentary being directed by John Irvin. So that's the background. This is where the story came from. John Irvin released this interview of the now deceased Donald Rickard. And in that interview, he discussed that he was the one. He was both a CIA agent and okay, thanks for that update. He was both a CIA agent and a part of the State Department. And in his role as a State Department, he was stationed in South Africa during apartheid South Africa. Because of his position, he felt, and you could read his own words. Washington Post has a good rewrite of it. He felt that he had a duty because of the relationship that South Africa had with Cuba and the Soviet Union and other communist states, and because of how America viewed communism and communist states at that time, he felt that it was his duty to help apprehend the very elusive Nelson Mandela, who prior to 1962 had eluded the South African authorities for many years. And so in his role as a CIA agent, above and beyond his role as a State Department diplomat, he knew and found where, and I quote, he said, "I found out when he was coming down and how he was coming, and that's where Mandela was caught." And so to cast a little more light on it, it really doesn't come as a surprise to me. And in fact, Nelson Mandela also recounted the fact that he believed that it was a U.S. diplomat or a CIA agent who was responsible for his arrest, leading to 27 years of imprisonment between 1963 and 1990. He was captured in 1962, started his sentence around 1963, released in 1990. Because of that, he believed all along he didn't have anything to prove it with, and so it was just a belief of his that it was the CIA. But now today it's coming out that indeed the agent who helped them find Mandela actually confessed in an interview for a documentary. I don't think this is a surprise to anyone when you consider the role of the CIA in the international community, and when you consider the relationship that America had with communism, and even the appearance of being aligned with communism during the Red Scare of the Cold War. So this doesn't come as a surprise. It doesn't even come as a disappointment, because when you realize the role that the CIA plays in many, in many circumstances, they are responsible for some of the more nefarious activities in the international community. It's not a disappointment. It's not a surprise. It's exactly what you would expect from the CIA. It's exactly, and not to just lay it there, it's exactly what you would expect from America. It's particularly Cold War America. We not only herded together people domestically. The McCarthy era, anyone who had any affiliation whatsoever, it was our own personal Salem witch trials tracking down people associated with communism. Now, we can get to the underlying philosophical and economic debate that is connected to it, the fear of communism and the revolution taking over the capitalistic imperialistic state. We can talk about that in a minute, but let's just talk about the role that America played in the international community here and domestically, and the role that it played specifically with Nelson Mandela, a freedom fighter, a leader, a revolutionary who was not afraid to take arms during that time. During the 60s, he realized that there came a point in their revolution against apartheid that they may have to take up arms, and he actually received training. And because of that, South African officials wanted him arrested, and the United States, through a CIA agent and a employee of the State Department, Donald Rickard, actually helped make that happen. So from a historical point of view, it really places an interesting perspective on top of the reality that, here is someone that we herald today from an American perspective. We talk as though we talk of Nelson Mandela in a very honorable, reflective, a person who overcame adversity, a person who overcame discrimination, apartheid, a person who overcame great challenges. A Nobel Peace Prize winner. We talk about him so triumphantly. Our American president went and spoke at his funeral with that very interesting sign language person behind him. I don't know if you guys remember that, but Nelson Mandela has ascended almost into the halls of American legend. And then you realize America had a hand in his 27 years of imprisonment. I mean, that should put things in perspective in terms of how we view America's view of people, ideologies, and times, right? So just because America is venerating Martin Luther King right now, we're venerating Nelson Mandela right now, what role, and it's starting to come out, what role the United States had in the imprisonment, in the persecution, in the problems of the era. And now we can whitewash everything, not only that America did and make it seem as though America was always on the right side of history, but we also whitewash that person. We whitewash what they fought for, what they died for, what they were imprisoned for. We whitewash that and just remember the more palatable versions of them. Right. We understand, the history books writes about Nelson Mandela, and I taught history some years, so I know this for a fact. The history books writes about him simply in two ways: that he was imprisoned because of injustices or because of apartheid, and he got free and he became the president of South Africa and the Nobel Peace Prize. And that's essentially it, completely erasing his revolutionary past and completely erasing the fact, or then we may not have known, but now will we update? I doubt it. The fact that America contributed to his imprisonment because of his revolutionary past and his associations with communist regimes. And I do want to talk about the underlying question of communism and capitalism and the fear of communism because of the fear of the proletariat revolution, right? The proletariat, the poor people of the world, the workers of the world uniting and pushing back against an imperialistic capitalistic system. There's this undercurrent of fear throughout American history, particularly in the turn of the 20th century, going into the Cold War, not the turn of the 20th century, but post World War II in the Cold War, this fear of any ideology that did not conform to this capitalistic system. And in fact, I was reading the book of the author that will be with me tomorrow, Eddie Glaude Jr., and I'm going to have my technology right by tomorrow. It's going to be a lot easier tomorrow. But I was reading the book by Eddie Glaude Jr., and he was discussing how that onset of the Cold War was really a turning point, not only in American politics, but particularly in liberal politics, where any idea, any type of politics that did not conform to what would later be known as neoliberalism, right? Any politics that did not conform to this acceptance of America's ideology without challenging it. Not just the acceptance of it, but the willingness to never challenge the underlying themes of America, the underlying problems of America, the inherent problems of our capitalistic system. Any ideology that did not conform to that was not only marginalized, but also persecuted and ostracized, for lack of a better word. And so in that onset, we saw the drifting away of leftist movements in the political discourse in the United States, right? The Overton window actually narrowed to be more about capitalism and the acceptance of capitalism and the acceptance of America's role in the international community, and never challenging America's role in the international community. And you see this strand, right? Always demanding that we accept America's role in the international community as inherently good, when in reality we see after the fact that this is not the case, that America has done a lot of bad. America has done some tremendous evils in the international community, and we saw a dramatic shift post World War II, on the onset of the Cold War, in terms of not even being able to discuss this in the political discourse. That's what we saw, and you see this evident in the story of the CIA agent helping to arrest, and I actually want to read more of his own words, helping to get Nelson Mandela arrested. Rickard made the claim, and this is from the Washington Post, that while speaking to John Irvin, he said that I when I found out where he was, I helped them track him down. All right, paraphrasing, but here it is. He said that we were teetering on the brink here, and it had to be stopped. Talking about Moscow and communism, he said it had to be stopped, which meant Mandela had to be stopped, which meant I put a stop to it. This is the ownership that he took on behalf of America to help imprison Nelson Mandela because of the fear of communism. Never mind the oppression of apartheid. Never mind the subjugation of private ownership of almost 3 million people who were forced to move from their private residences. Never mind that even apartheid South Africa betrayed capitalism for the sake of their fear and hatred of blackness. Right? Never mind that. So it wasn't even being true to capitalism, but because the people that were oppressed aligned and affiliated and got training from some international actors that the United States did not agree with, well, then they themselves became the enemy. And as a result, Nelson Mandela was arrested. So it just puts a fine shade on top of America's role in the international community and our inability in previous years to discuss whether or not America's role was actually as noble as our history books tried to write, and our inability to discuss whether or not that role is something that needs to be changed. And I love the fact that now we're actually having these types of conversations on a broader scale and a broader scope, such that we're able to question America's nobleness in the international community now, right? We can do it more so now than we have ever done it before. And the only question that comes to mind for me is, how will they stop it now, right? We can't go back to the McCarthy era. We can't go back to where the Red Scare, where anyone who's affiliated or associated with any idea other than America's greatness and capitalism can be herded together and arrested, or at a minimum marginalized and pushed outside of the norms, so that it seems that any idea other than the standard token line of America's greatness and America's nobility throughout the international community and domestically and internationally, any conversation other than that is marginalized and seen as too radical for the normal discourse.